John Herbst joins me from Fairfax, Virginia. He is a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and a senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Thank you very much, John, for joining us here on TRT World. You know what stands out for me as a journalist when I look at the latest developments in Ukraine is the fact that Russia has ramped up its attacks across Ukraine. We are hearing reports of Russian attacks as far west as Lviv, which reminds me of the time when the invasion first began, the months of February and March. So are we back to where it all started from?
What we're seeing is continued failure of the Russian military. Moscow has been bombing across Ukraine at the start of the war, and especially now in the last 3 months, because their military has been defeated on the battlefield. First, Moscow was trying to take Kiev. That failed. They tried to take Kharkiv. That failed. Then they said they were going to capture all of Donbass. That's failed. They claimed they were going to take Bakhmut by the middle of December. That's failed. And of course, they lost Kherson. They lost much of the Luhansk Oblast in the Ukrainian counteroffensive that began in the summer. So we've seen failure after failure after failure. The only thing Moscow has been able to do is to conduct this aerial war. And even that has problems because they're unable to produce enough of their own bombs, their own drones, their own missiles to do it. They have to take missiles or drones from the Iranians. So Moscow is kind of like a helpless Goliath, except for the ability to impose pain on the Ukrainian people, but not enough to make the Ukrainian people want to surrender. Moscow is going to lose this war. The only question is when.
Ambassador, correct me if I'm wrong. So what you were saying is that Moscow has applied a failed strategy in Ukraine, and this strategy is only going to lead to more failure. Correct.
Look, I went through all the specific failures of their operation. Your military analyst pointed out the inability of them to sustain the offensive to regain Bakhmut. And still, Putin says he wants to achieve his objectives, which is the subjugation of Ukraine. Their refusal to consider peace talks based upon international principles like territorial integrity demonstrates they have not changed their objectives. Yet they don't have a military that's able to achieve those objectives. The question is, how long will the Russian army be able to sustain even this feeble effort on the field? Will it at some point collapse? That is a real possibility, although it's hard to predict when that would happen.
But Ambassador, you know, Russia's refusal to negotiate the war is mind-boggling, isn't it? Especially given the fact that Moscow has faced defeats after defeats in Ukraine. Why do you think Russia keeps refusing negotiations over the war in Ukraine?
Putin is hoping that by continuing the war, he's going to outlast the West. Ukraine will win this war as long as American and European support does not drop below where it is right now. Putin's hoping that over time, the West will say, no, this is too expensive, this is too difficult, and drop its support. I think Putin's making a failed bet, but that's his game. I would add one more important point. If the United States were not so timid and were to send the more advanced weapons Ukraine has been asking for months, the war would end sooner.
Very fascinating insight into the topic. Ambassador John Herbst, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.